this might be a tough decision right now.
My
but
team
I'm
did
not just
absolutely garbage.
NFL games that were like,
Right.
whoa.
I actually don't
Had
understand.
a lot of mixed feelings. Welcome, Disgruntled. We have another guest here on the Legal Domains.
Hey guys, this is part 3 of my wildlife experience. Yes, I'm really milking this out, aren't I? Excuse me. I always burp. But in this episode, we are going to be covering a lot as in the same as before, under half an hour. But the first story that I do want to tell is one winter when I was little. Yeah, in the middle of one winter, in the middle of one winter, when I was young, I don't know how old I was, and it's another pond story. I don't know how my pond keeps getting into basically every story, but it's another pond story. I didn't realize I had this many memories of just one story, or of one pond, and such a small pond as well. But one day I was watching TV, and basically how my house was positioned is that like out of one window you can like see the pond clearly and like see, basically you can see the entire like backyard because like we had a lot of windows, so like from one end to the other you could basically see the entire backyard if you just like looked out the window. So I was, where the living room was positioned was that you're sitting on the couch, you can see the pond out of like the corner of the room, and then you're watching TV. And again, like all my entire layout of my house is up on YouTube, so if you want to see, go search for it somewhere. I don't know where it is, but I was watching TV and I look out and I see this one dog. Look, I never seen this dog before. I look and I was watching and this one dog was staring into the pond. I'm like, I wonder why that dog's staring into the pond. And since I was little, I don't have every single detail, so I don't remember exactly the entire events that happened all in one area, or I don't know the exact sequence of events. But I was like, oh crap, what is he looking at? And then I realized that there was another dog in the pond, and the one dog is trying to help it get out, and the dog was like struggling to get out of the pond. And so my mom and dad, I think my dad rushed out and basically helped the dog out of the water and got like towels and stuff because like it was really cold outside. So obviously my dad didn't want like the dog to shiver, and he brought them into like the garage and stuff, I believe, and took care of them, like took care of the dog and got the dog like warm. I think we gave them food and water. I think at the time we still had my one dog, Buttons. He got them, and then they had collars, so we were able to call our owners, and I think we knew who the dogs were anyways because it was about like a couple of houses down across the street, and like we all knew because it was 2 huskies, and they always barked. That even throughout my entire time, they're all 17, 18 years of my life, there was always these dogs that were across the street, and I feel like that family just kept getting dogs, but they were always loud. They always had like at least 3 dogs at like a singular time, and they sound, every time when they left the house it sounded like they were getting abused, but obviously that was not the case by any means, but it was just woof woof woof, constant woof when they let out, and it was just crazy. But we were able to call their owners. They came and picked up the dogs, but it was kind of sad too because one of the dogs was blind, so like he couldn't see, so that's why the dog fell in. Obviously there's snow on the ground as well, so they probably slipped, which didn't make it any better. But the dog is all good. The dog is all good. Believe that I think it died like a few months later because just of how old it was. And yeah, so that's one of the other crazy stories that happened in the pond, is that a dog fell in. Another cool little wildlife adventure is that a lot of blue herons came to the pond, and like the one time when, like, it's crazy how big blue herons are because it's like what are those flying dinosaurs? It starts with a T. Tyrannosaurus? No. I don't know. Triceratops? No. Pterodactyls. It's like a pterodactyl flying above it, and you can see when it's flying, you can see its shadow, and it's like it's like, you know, when a blue heron's flying over by, like it's almost impossible not to see one. But we had every time, or a lot of the times these blue herons throughout the summer and spring would come to our pond and start eating stuff around the pond because like there's natural wildlife around this pond, like frog eggs, little fish, bugs, and other little creatures around this pond. And we would have fish in the pond as well, like goldfish and other minnows, other types of fish. And this blue heron, I think it was a family, but I just remember seeing one big blue heron would always come and eat the fish and stuff. And the one time, it was so big, like my dad and I were like out in our porch area in the backyard, just sitting, and we just, out of nowhere, we look up and the blue heron like was flying overhead and like landed by the pond and like was standing by the pond. So that was a really cool experience to have like a blue heron fly that close, like right above you, and like land at the pond like 50 to 100 yards away. Like that was a crazy experience. But we ended up putting a blue heron statue, which is an interesting concept. So like if you don't want any birds or a particular animal, you just put a statue of it and they won't come because they think that blue heron is real and it's that blue heron's like territory, so they don't mess with like that area if they see another blue heron there. They're very territorial, so we put one above the pond, or like remember the first episode of this, it's kind of like on top of the hill where it's like kind of on the slope, but it was like the first layer of rocks, and we put one there. We never saw another blue heron there again once we put that statue up, which is crazy because they would come often, and basically like at least 2 or 3 times a week we would see a blue heron at the pond. But after we put up the statue, there was absolutely no blue herons left. I said multiple times like throughout recently, it's crazy how many times I've been saying this or this information, but it is a part of the wildlife experience at my house. But like the pets that I have I had 4 cats, a dog, a couple turtles, 4 lizards, a snake, a duck, and a couple other miscellaneous animals like that. And if you want a more in-depth like an explanation or whatever, I think the most recent Kids with Divorced Parents episode, I talked about it in more depth. Like the bird story. Oh, I had goldfish as well. Bird story with my sister. So if you want to check that out, I think it's in the latest Kids with Divorced Parents, so I'm not going to repeat that story. So yeah, it was cool to see like my pets and stuff interact with the wildlife and just like the surrounding area, but sad as well because that also was the end of a few of our pets. Like one of my pets one of my sister's birds flying away while she's cleaning the bird cage, and then finding it in the newspaper a couple days later. Finding that same exact bird in the newspaper. Well, I'm trying to think. Hold on. What was I talking about? Oh, okay, so one of the crazy like interactions is that we had this duck, and my sister stole this duck from a food market place. Oh, I think. We had like this food market place in Lancaster City, I believe, or like a Chinese place or a Japanese place. I forget, but it was like a place where they had ducks. I don't think it was a Japanese or Chinese food place. I think it was like the food market that we had in like the middle of Lancaster. I forgot what it's called. She basically stole this duck because like she didn't want this duck to die, and she was just sad for all the ducks because it was like all cooped up and stuff and ready to eat, whatever. So she felt really bad for this duck, so she stole it, brought it home, and so we had this duck for about a year and a half, which is a long time. Not a long time for a duck's life, but I feel like for a pet, ducks don't usually last a while because I guess I only had 2 experiences with pet ducks. But like just from what I heard from other people, it's my own experience, like they don't live that long. I don't live that long because one, they either fly away or like walk away, or they get eaten by like an animal, like a fox, a bird, cat even, and that's exactly what happened to this duck. I just wanted to explain the relationship between the duck and my dog first because I think it's really funny. And this dog that I had, it died around when I was in 3rd grade about, so I caught the tail end of her being old and crippled and decrepit. But it was cool to see the interaction with the duck and my dog Buttons, because like there's videos of it. I've shown it on the podcast, the most recent Kids with Divorced Parents podcast, or the one before that. So check that out too. Scott Val 67 the YouTube channel that my dad posted on. So if you want to check out the full videos, go search that up on YouTube. Like this duck would like groom my dog, like peck at its like fur and stuff, and just itch it, and I don't get bugs, I guess, or like not bugs, but like I don't even know, not fleas or anything, but I guess like little dust mites, or just, you know, from being outside, just having the natural bugs crawl on my dog, I guess. But you'd see like my duck like nip at my dog and stuff, and just like itch it, and like, I don't know, groom it, I guess. But like my dogs and this dog's relationship was really cool, and they like bonded instantly, and it's one of those stories where it's like two unlikely like animals bond together. They made a show about it. I forget what that show is called, but it's on Animal Planet. If you're an OG Animal Planet watcher or viewer, you would know. The one time my dog and this duck started to like walk away from the house, and we didn't know where they were. So what the hell? And then, but I think we saw a glimpse of them like going to the front yard and like walking to the right. And basically how my development works is, where I'm located, my house was like in the back of the development, but it was basically like this figure 8. So like we were on the smaller end of the figure 8, so it's the road's in the middle, it goes the big loop, like it's like a figure 8, so I lived on like the line in the middle of the 8, so it's like basically one big loop, it comes around a smaller loop, and it joins around, and it's like this figure 8 where you can go all the way around both ends, like any point on the line of this figure 8. But since we lived on the smaller like block, or the smaller end bottom of the figure 8, my dogs, to get like a understanding of it, but my dog and this duck, Mimi, they went to the right, and they started to walk around the smaller cul-de-sac, or the smaller circle, half of the figure 8. And we were able to see like my dog and the duck at the last moment before like they got too far. And then they were able to manage to get up this small hill by the time we like ran down the small hill of the front yard, and we looked to the right, and it was just like cool. It's almost like out of a movie, because so I keep burping. But it was almost like out of a movie, because like the dog, it was like a perfect picturesque, where the duck was waddling, and like it was flying, like it got up at moments, and it was like flying next to my dog, and my dog was just like slowly walking and stuff, and it was like really weird, because it was just like the bond that they had was really unique and stuff, and they were always side by side or next to each other, the bestest of friends, and it was cool to see that relationship. But they were always up to no good, like trying to run away or walk away, because my dog was old at that time, so she walked slow. But it was just cool to see that shot, and it's like I was in the movie, like I said before. But the way that that duck died was really sad, and we still don't 100% know what happened to it, or how it died, or like what caused its death. Unfortunately, I was the one who found it. So me and my mom, the same area when I told her about the buck story, where our buck could have just charged me and almost killed me. Could have killed me, not almost killed me, but could have killed me if my dad didn't say anything. If you want to hear that story, check out the last podcast. But it was my mom and I parked in the same area where my dad and I parked at when we saw the buck or whatever. And because that's usually where we park, so like that was the closest, and we always went in through the back way, or the backyard way through our house, because that's the easiest, because I don't know, it was just easier and a lot more comfortable to walk in. But so we just came home my mom and I just came home from, I think, school, or like getting groceries. I don't know where we were coming from, but I remember like my mom parking, me getting out, and it was a fall day too, so like most of the leaves were on the ground on the backyard. I remember like walking out of the car, and I was taking the left to go into the house, like take a left onto the path that leads to the house. I remember looking at the grass part of the yard. It was just like a big long strip. Again, I have my backyard all laid out on other videos, so if you want to check that out, come through my videos. But so I remember looking, and I don't even know why or what made me look in this direction. I guess it was like, if you're just looking down, it's kind of hard not to see it or just look. it's a natural like view when you're walking this way. But I don't know what made me look in this particular area of the yard. But I just remember walking and then looking, and I remember seeing my duck, and it was like dead on the ground. And basically what happened is, or how the duck was like positioned on the yard, it basically, its body and its entire neck was ringed out. So like you could see the entire neck bone and its head. Like it was like not a foot, but maybe half a foot, maybe 6 inches, 6 to 8 inches of just bone out of the duck's body. And so an animal must have wringed its neck out, obviously, and killed it. And there's multiple things that we think it was. So the most likely and logical answer is that we had this Chinese cat, Japanese cat, that used to like roam around the neighborhood, or just that, I'll get into that story afterwards. But there's this Chinese cat, it would just roam around, and it was kind of like a hunter, or it was an outdoors cat, so it always was looking for like mice to eat, or just anything to catch, chipmunks, like moles or whatever. But we think that it was this Chinese cat that like wringed out its neck. We also had the possibility, or thought of the possibility, of it being a hawk maybe, or there was this dog too that my neighbor used to walk, or one of my neighbors used to walk. I think he had two of the same dogs, one little older I believe, but he used to walk his dogs around like the big loop, because he lived right on the intersection of that line in the middle of this figure 8. He lived on like the road directly in front of that line. But he used to walk these dogs, and we had this one interaction or altercation where like the dogs tried to kill like the ducks. I think the dog was able to get Ming Ming's neck and hold it in its like mouth, and was basically just carrying the duck around for a while. So like we had that altercation with the dog, but the dog had like the duck's neck in its mouth and was like running around with it a little bit. So we had that altercation with that dog. So we think that it could have been that dog, but we crossed that out because like we don't know why like that dog would have been in that area of our yard, because the yard, or the area that we found the duck, it was pretty like far in the backyard, and you would actually have to go out of your way from the street and into the yard to actually get it where the duck was. So we don't think it was that dog, because we just like, why would our neighbor come like in the middle of our backyard with 2 dogs? Like that just doesn't make sense. And it like died in that area too. It's not like someone picked it up and placed it in that area either. Like it died in, you could see like the feathers and stuff, that it like died in that location and was ringed out in that location. But yeah, that was crazy to see that fully ringed out duck's neck just like in the middle of the yard. And then so this Chinese cat too. So we had this neighbor, next door neighbors, it was in the backyard. Like you could access this neighbor's house via like the backyard path that we had, that I explained earlier, like this deer trail or man-made trail that we had to the back. That path basically led to the backyard of our neighbors, and they had this cat, which was like the craziest cat. It was so beautiful, but it was almost like a bobcat, like the bone, the structure of how like it stands and walked and stuff, just that kind of structure, like the hind legs as well, just how it moved, the motions. It reminded me a lot of like a bobcat, of how that moved, and it was very like wild looking. It looked more like it was meant to be in the wild than like a domesticated cat. Even though it was a domesticated cat, it was very much a domesticated cat. But like if you would have told me, like if without that knowledge, I would have thought that it was a wild cat. And which, when I first saw this cat, I remember this distinctly, I did think it was a fox of some sort, because I was the end of my driveway, across the street, there's these mountain laurel, in which I showed a picture on the last episode. So if you want to see what a mountain laurel is, go look up on Google, or just go back to that video. So there's a like patch of mountain laurel, and I was coming up the hill to go into my driveway, and it was early evening, so it was just when dusk came. No, is that dusk? It was basically transitioning to nighttime, the sunset, I guess. But I remember looking at, for whatever reason, into these like patch of mountain oil, and I just remember seeing eyes, like golden eyes, and I just could see the like, shadow of it. I couldn't see the colors. I couldn't see like the full thing, but I could roughly make out like a figure, and I was like younger as well, so like my imagination took off. But I was like, oh shit, is that a fox? Like, oh my god, like there are foxes around my area, but it's kind of rare to see one, just because they're just like always moving. But we do have like foxes where we are. I'll lead into that as well. It's like, oh crap, that's a weird looking fox. And I was like, oh wait, is that a fox? And then I kind of saw it more, and I kind of saw its face. I was like, that's a weird looking fox. But I just kept walking up into my house and went into my house. Didn't think any of it. But then I saw it like a couple days later. I was, oh crap, that wasn't a fox. That was a cat. And I was like, oh crap, that's crazy. The only reason why I was able to pinpoint like, oh, that cat was the fox that I saw earlier. The only reason why I was able to make that distinction between, the fox that I saw, quote unquote, the fox that I saw, and the cat, because of the face structure, because I remember the face structure. And I was like, as I saw this cat like move more, like, oh, okay, that makes more sense. It was the fox, or it was the thing that I thought was a fox a couple days ago, just because I was just putting two together, and I just remembered more of the structure of the quote unquote fox that I saw a couple days ago. If that makes any sense. But it was a really interesting cat. It was mostly an outdoor cat, and it was very like a bobcat, like I said earlier, how it moved, and it just like, you obviously could tell that it was like eating the mice or moles around the area, which was nice. And so yeah, it was just cool to see it like walk. Since it was our neighbors, it like walked in our yard a lot of the times, and sometimes my dad and I would scare it, just go, I need to just start sprinting, but it always came through our backyard, like up in the wooded areas. It never went through like the grass area, but it was always up in the wooded areas, and it was just always cool to see it because it was like a little mini bobcat. It didn't have like the coloration of a bobcat, but it was I think it was like a brown coat, which is very pretty. And so yeah, that's the story of that. Some of the other wildlife we had, I think I said this in the first episode, but we had like foxes, which I only saw two or three foxes. When I was there, it's very rare that you saw foxes in that neighborhood for whatever reason. You have possums, you have raccoons. I saw more possums than raccoons. You don't really see the raccoons that much. Possums are ugly motherfuckers, but we see more possums than anything. I never saw a skunk there before. So we definitely had skunks in the area, but just never in my neighborhood for whatever reason. Yeah, I just didn't see those creatures that often because they're nocturnal, and I just wasn't out as much in the night, or like in the locations where it's darker, because obviously like people in my neighborhood had like night lights on that they kept on all night, so like they weren't in that area, I guess, unless it's the trash. But even then, like the trash, some people's trash was like in the light, so like you'd have to walk around the neighborhood and walk in the dark areas to actually see some, like in the middle of the night or some shit, to actually see them. I'm trying to remember another story to tell. Oh, okay. I got 2 more quick stories to tell before time's up. And I don't know if I'm going to make a part 4 or not. I'll explain that later. But so back to the snakes. We had this neighbor. He was kind of like the bad boy type. He was a skater, and he was just always up to no good. And he had this boa constrictor, and he didn't want this boa constrictor anymore. So he let it go in our neighborhood. And for the like 4 years, everyone always saw this boa constrictor like going around. Like, it's a pretty big boa constrictor. And it I don't know where he released it. I think he released it in our lake, or near our lake. And basically this boa constrictor lived around this lake because it was Lakewood, and we had a pretty massive lake. And so like people would see it occasionally just like moving across a rock, or just on the other side of like the lake. And me, my neighborhood friend, and my mom one time went to like the lake to like go around to see if we can search for this boa constrictor. We never found it, but there's just always stories of people finding this boa constrictor and stuff, and it was like 4 foot big, and it was a pretty decently sized boa constrictor. I don't know what happened to it afterwards. I think it was a male, so it couldn't reproduce, and even if it wanted to reproduce, it couldn't because like there was no other boa constrictors that could produce the baby, or produce babies, obviously. But that was just like an odd thing. So we had like a loose boa constrictor that survived in our neighborhood for a few years. And then the other story that I wanted to tell, so I used to have like a lot of campfires and stuff, and just like fires out in the middle of the day just because like I was bored. So my next door neighbor, he was like my childhood friend for a while, and then a neighbor, he lived up the street. We were having like a little fire and stuff, and we found this toad, and we were messing around with it. It was like, I think my one friend had it, and he was like messing. I was like, oh, I'm gonna throw it into the fire, and then he ended up throwing it, but he wasn't trying to throw it into the fire. He was trying to like land it next to the fire to scare us and have it just like hop away. But when he threw it, he accidentally threw it directly into the fire, and it like burnt up and like turned into ash, and then basically like we could hear it sizzled, and we were like, oh no, oh fuck. And it was like, oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck. Like we killed this like little toad, and we just started to crack up laughing because we were like 8, 9, 10 years old, and we were just cracking up laughing. We were messed up kids. Me and this, like another time, like me and my childhood friend who lived next door, my next door neighbor, like we would burn like action figures and stuff and melt them in fires and just play with them like that and melt them and just be like having them in war and then like killing them in the fire and stuff and melting our little toy soldiers, like the Toy Story green soldiers, green plastic ones. So yeah, that's kind of the experience with campfires and stuff. But I'm thinking that there will be a part 4 to this, because there are a few stories that I will think of over the week that I want to tell. But yeah, I have a shit ton of wildlife stories around my house, just so many different experiences. Thank you for watching.